Dr. Ashley Mahoney is a postdoctoral fellow with expertise in psychological testing and individual therapy across the lifespan. Whether you're healing from complex trauma, unpacking the impact of systemic oppression, exploring your neurodivergence, or reconnecting with parts of yourself that feel hidden, she believes that you deserve a space that truly understands you. She earned her doctorate in clinical psychology at Roosevelt University in Illinois and completed her internship at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, in their counseling center, where she specialized in disability services. Her experience spans community mental health, college counseling centers, and private practice. And we are so pleased to have you here, Dr. Mahoney. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I apologize. As soon as I took a drink, I took it the wrong way. So my name is Dr. Mahoney. I use she, her pronouns. And today we're going to be going over anxiety as a whole. And I will encourage you to be reflecting and really thinking about the ways that these tools that I'll give you can help you in your day-to-day life. There will be time for questions at the end. So if you could please hold on to them, you could put them in the chat and we will look at them at the end, and then we'll have about 15 minutes to kind of talk over different questions that you have about anxiety. I will encourage you for questions. I may not be able to fully answer your question. There's a lot of experiences that you've had. There's a lot of context of what you've experienced and things like that. So I will always encourage you to talk to a one-on-one with a professional if there's anything that goes beyond like general questions. But let's get into it today. So I'm going to start out with discussing different topics. So we're going to go over what is anxiety, some symptoms of anxiety and when it becomes more excessive, a little bit on anxiety disorders, and then the part what we're all here for is how do we address it, and what are some things that we can do in our day-to-day to kind of help reduce that anxiety. So something that I think I didn't really know about prior to starting graduate school and getting my doctorate degree in psychology was that there's a purpose to all of our emotions. There's a reason why we experience them, and it has changed over time. However, the main purpose of anxiousness, and I'm purposely not saying anxiety because anxiety is a different being of this, like it branches off of it. So anxiousness is a natural emotional response that is intended to help us navigate threats. So this next slide will make more sense. So when we are facing threats, we usually think about this in the sense of like back in the day, we used to see bears and then it would trigger this fight, flight, freeze or fawn mode. So in reaction to a threat, we may face the perceived threat aggressively. We might run away from it. We might freeze. You know, you're unable to move or act and you kind of shut down, dissociate, and get a little numb. And then fawn is a newer concept in the psychological space of like, it's changed, and versus like a bear, it's more like in the face of what we can perceive as like a social threat, where you're trying to please someone in order to avoid any conflict. So anxiousness brings us to help us navigate threats, and how it does that is that it activates this survival mechanism. And it can be very useful, right? So when we are afraid of an upcoming exam, that anxiety can make us face the exam and study and things like that. Or it can kind of be not as helpful, right? That's where we think of flight. I might avoid studying. I might not go to class and things like that. So it actually can be unhelpful. But it can be useful in moments. The thing that changes us from like anxiousness, which kind of activates these threat responses, is that we are now when we get to anxiety category, we are perceiving situations that are threatening. So think it's activating this piece that may feel uncertain or unclear. So the situations may feel uncertain, unclear, and then it's activating this piece. So although we're not running away from lions anymore, we might be worried about being rejected by others. We might be worried about losing a job. Like currently in our state of the country, like the relentless news cycle brings a lot of anxiety for a lot of people, economic uncertainty. There's just so much that's happening that can kind of trigger this reaction. And what anxiety, which I will talk here, is anxiety is more of a chronic response. We're kind of always being activated in that state. And it can become really relentless when we chronically respond to challenges in this way. So, what is anxiety? We think of this as a mental and physical state of persistent and excessive worry. I like to kind of differentiate it from stress and fear. So, stress and fear, stress and fear are very short term, and they happen with these identifiable specific threats. So, like I said before, um, we might be stressed about taking a test. However, it is short term and it's only with that one test. Where anxiety occurs regardless of a specific stressor or a specific threat. So with anxiety, you might be able to identify something specific. However, anxiety is like a background almost. We might be able to identify, okay, that test is making me anxious. However, after that test is done, anxiety kind of prompts you to have different worries and different stressors. So it doesn't really matter what you're anxious about. Um, it will always kind of be there no matter what's going on. So that's what kind of makes anxiety really debilitating and really impairing for your day-to-day stuff. Some other pieces that I listed here is that avoidance is very uh, big in anxiety. So it kind of provides, I'll talk a little bit later in the anxiety cycle, but avoidance is a huge characteristic of anxiety. That unease, that like background of never really feeling settled, never really feeling calm, just always a little bit unease. And then another piece about anxiety is that it's future oriented. We are always thinking about what is going to happen in the future and fearing what is going to happen in the future. So then we're less in the present. Um, so that can also make things difficult for someone. So something I want folks to take a second is if you are coming here because you experience anxiety, or if you're coming here for someone else that is experiencing anxiety, I just want you to take, we'll say like 20 seconds to think about what comes up for you. What does anxiety look like for you or for that other person that you came here for? Like what emotions pop up? What thoughts kind of pop up? How does it physically impact you or that person? And I know this is a little harder because we don't see each other's faces, but I hope you're able to take that time to kind of think about. So these are common things that pop up with anxiety. I kind of had it all scattered about because this is kind of like how anxiety is. It's very feeling out of control, very all over the place. Um, and they're just different things that all together make it difficult and overwhelming. So some things that are notable for anxiety is that feeling out of control, Uh, that constant worry. You're constantly worried about things that are upcoming, different aspects of your life. It could be personal, social, work, school. There's also sleeping issues. Anxiety can make it hard to fall asleep. Anxiety can make it hard to stay asleep. I've worked with clients who wake up in the middle of the night because of anxiety. And, that's very scary. Another piece of anxiety is the physical piece. So, aches and pains, your stomach can hurt from all that tension, a lot of muscle tension. You can feel very tired. Uh, it's also hard to relax. And then it impacts us emotionally. We get very irritable, right? If we're not sleeping, we're feeling out of control, all these things that impacts how we feel around others, inflammation. So these are just some examples of different experiences that people have had. And of course, like I said before about like that one-on-one piece, you may not be experiencing all of these things. What you experience is unique to you. However, this is common things that we see with folks with anxiety. Something else that I forgot to mention on this slide is the reassurance piece. So often when we are experiencing that excessive worry and that makes us worry about that worry, we might ask others for reassurance often to see, like, I might be worried about how I'm doing on this presentation right now. So then I might ask someone who came, like, hey, how did I do? And that can be pretty frequent and something that I think can be difficult in relationships is when we're experiencing anxiety, is that anxiety is frustrating for you who is experiencing it, and then it can be frustrating for the people around you. And that's why these tools that we'll be talking about a little bit later are very helpful to kind of regulate yourself so that you're able to give yourself that reassurance. And because that someone else can tell you that whatever your anxiety is fine, and you might not still believe it. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit about those things that you can do to work on and help you kind of get through. So here's the anxiety cycle. Um, and this is, I love visuals because I feel like it helps me understand what's going on. So we'll start out, so we'll see the big circle's anxiety circle, and then that kind of upside down U shape, the little bell curve is a healthy nervous system. With a healthy nervous system, we are faced with some sort of stimulus. So I will use that test example. I have an upcoming test, and I am interpreting this test as like, oh, I might not pass that class if I don't ace this test. And then it brings us to that fight, flight, fawn, and freeze response. So I might avoid it for a little bit, but eventually I will face it. Instead of avoiding studying for the test, I will be able to regulate myself and start studying, and then I get into the parasympathetic response. So when we're in that fight, flight, freeze, we go to the sympathetic response where we're getting really activated. We're really on the go, right? That's why it activates that response in us. When we go to parasympathetic, that's more of that calm. I can relax a bit. I'm able to regulate and ground. I'm able to breathe. I can laugh about it that I didn't study and all this stuff. And I eventually did. And then we're back to that safety or back to our neutral response. Well, with anxiety, I might have that test, same situation. I need to pass it to be able to pass the class. Well, I get in the fight, flight, freeze response and fawn, and then I avoid it. And that avoidance is helpful for a moment. We get that short-term relief. I'm put it off so then I can feel a little bit better in the moment. But then that actually reinforces the anxiety and just keeps going because I'm going to keep avoiding it. Well, then I eventually might not study for the test and then I might fail the test and it's just going to keep going and going. But then because I didn't pass that class, I can't do my major or whatever it is. It just keeps going. And that's the difference between like a healthy nervous system and then an anxious nervous system where we have this pattern. I also have another metaphor if this didn't make much sense or if I talked too fast. So, another metaphor is in a game of tug of war, both sides are pulling until they're exhausted and covered in rope burns. One side is anxiety, and the other side is you. So, in this metaphor, when you play tug of war with anxiety, you aren't letting it go. Uh, Anxiety is never going to give up. Anxiety is never going to let go of that rope, and you're never going to be able to pull it over. So the way to approach it then is to let those anxious thoughts be, choose to drop the rope, and walk away. This will make a little bit more sense in some of the tools that I'll talk about. But the sense is the less that we try to control the anxiety and we just let it be, we just accept that we are having anxious thoughts, but then we make the decisions that we want to make, the easier it will get. And then anxiety has less power over you. So, go to the next. And if anyone has questions, I will definitely answer them at that moment. Okay. So with this slide, I'm not going to go through all the anxiety disorders. I think that if you are experiencing something that I've talked about already, I do encourage you to see a professional to kind of look at what you are experiencing and potentially if you have an anxiety disorder. But these are all the anxiety disorders that we treat and also know about. And what they're all characterized by is that there's this intense fear and there's significant anxiety that is disproportionate to whatever is going on. And it's happening for a long time. So generally, this has been going on for 6 months and it impairs your ability to work, it impairs your ability to socialize, it impairs your ability to perform at school and just other important areas. And like I said before, with that anxiety cycle, all these anxiety disorders, what they have in common is that avoidance piece in some form. And specifically, what I've talked about a lot, like that excessive anxiety that's difficult to control, things like that, that is that generalized anxiety disorder. These other ones are more specific to different aspects of anxiety, but generalized anxiety disorder is more common among these ones. And it's also associated with that physical piece. So, like that muscle tension, the restlessness, things like that. And I think like we hear a lot about anxiety disorders in like society. And I think that one piece that if you are supporting someone with anxiety, I really would love to get the message across that it is really debilitating. It is really hard to live with an anxiety disorder. And just to give yourself and that person grace. So, what I have here is these aren't the tools, but this is just some general things that I think that are helpful for addressing anxiety. The most important piece is finding your resources. Who can help you? And where can you find that help? I have a handout that I don't know if was put in the Zoom or it will be sent to you after the presentation. I have ways that you can find resources, because this is really important. Another extremely important part in anxiety is your physical health. So if you're not sleeping, your anxiety is going to get worse. Um, Exercise is extremely helpful for anxiety. So like I said, when we're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, we have a lot of energy in that mode. Exercise kind of helps alleviate some of that piece, that physical piece of restlessness. And as well as eating healthily. Another thing I like to add is like some things we forget in adulthood is play and like the joy in playing more in our lives. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like back when you were a child, like, playing tag or anything, but just laughing and having moments of fun. We just need more of that in our lives, because you can't run on empty all the time. Or you can, but it's not going to be fun and definitely not ideal. Um, but something I always like to impart onto folks. Also, keep in touch with your spiritual health, whether you have a faith, and engaging in those faith-based practices, or just general finding purpose and meaning. I think that's very important. That emotional health piece, just being mindful with yourself, checking in with yourself, giving yourself grace, and engaging in things to kind of put you in a better spot. Social health is very important. Finding your community and being able to communicate to others, I think is extremely important. So beyond like the professional help, knowing who you can go to, and which I'll go into the another slide, different types of supports and being able to get that support from different folks. The last part I have here is like your role. So I think knowing your limitations is important. So what is in your control and what is not in your control. Um, I think a piece with anxiety is trying to control things that we cannot and learning how to accept that certain things we cannot control. And that's when it comes to the part of accepting that the anxiety is there and not fighting with it, not struggling with it, and learning how to regulate and then make a decision based on what you want in your life and not letting anxiety take over. Another piece that I want to address is boundaries. I know a lot of people talk about boundaries. However, it is important to know when to say no. And I know we don't have a lot of time in this presentation, but something quick I like to say is saying no to someone else is saying yes to you. And we may not be used to saying yes for ourselves, but it is so important in your long-term mental health. And then this last piece is with anxiety. The unfortunate part is you have to challenge it. We cannot continue to reinforce that cycle. It is not allowing you to live how you want to live. So challenging your anxiety is a huge part of treatment. And of course, you work your way up there. You just don't go right on all the way to the top, but challenging your anxiety in small ways is important. So the types of social supports, I just want to quickly go over this just so folks know. I think we're often taught to have like one person in our life that does all of these things, but is much more beneficial for you and your community and all the folks that you're with to have different types of social support. So that emotional piece, like someone who can listen without judgment and help you engage in coping strategies. So a tangible piece would be like someone who could share resources with you. So that could be like your therapist or someone that can help you financially, things like that. Informational support. So people who you trust to get advice from or you can problem solve with. And then belonging. So like someone you can have fun with or someone who makes you feel like you belong. So just getting your needs met from a variety of different people is totally recommended. And then if you are the person that's supporting someone with anxiety, some piece of knowledge that I will pass on is that no amount of reinsurance to someone with anxiety, so reassuring them, is going to make them feel better long term because we're not addressing that underlying issue. Like I said, that specific thing, there will always be a different specific thing coming on because of that underlying anxiety. So just also, if you are taking care or supporting someone with anxiety, know that, but also know to take care of yourself and be aware of burnout. When we are supporting others, it is okay to step away and have those boundaries as well and take care of ourselves because we can't help someone if we're not taking care of ourselves. Also, if you are supporting someone with anxiety, listening without judgment, that's a skill. Encouraging professional support, and then avoiding minimizing or giving quick fixes, because like I said, that's not really hitting that underlying issue. And then modeling coping strategies. If someone's really anxious, we model breathing and going along with them. And then that's helpful for us as well. So tools, what we came here for. So I have a couple things here that I think is very powerful to use. The one thing I will say for any of these little takeaways, the most important part is to treat these things as if they are a muscle. Just like if you were to go to the gym 4 days a week, every week, to get your bodybuilder build, with these techniques, you also have to use like a muscle and build it up. It is a skill. It takes a while, but it can be done. It just takes that extra effort. And once you have a big muscle of these techniques, they work even better. So one thing I kind of want to talk about is giving your thoughts less power. This is extremely helpful in anxiety. It kind of goes along with that metaphor I told you about. You could fight with anxiety all day on that tug of war. However, it's never going to give up. So so I work from an acceptance and commitment therapy approach. And in that approach, we think of thoughts, feelings, and internal experiences like we're hooked to them. So we think of these things as all real and we must act upon all these things. So they have a lot of power over us. Like, right, anxiety is driving the car instead of me. And when we fuse with this thought, whatever anxious thought we have, we treat it as a fact. We treat it as a command. We treat it like a prediction, even when it's just an internal experience. We have millions of thoughts all the time. Not every single one of them are correct or should be treated like it's the truth. So these exercises help with detaching from these experiences. We will notice the thought. We are not trying to change the thought. We're not trying to reduce the anxiety. We are letting go. It's not something we have to obey. So when we're able to reduce the emotional impact of anxiety, that gives us more freedom in how we want to respond. So with this exercise, I'd like to start, and we're going to do this together. I'd like to start out by having you by yourself think of an unhelpful or hurtful thought that you've had recently. So I will use this thought that's not my own, but I'm an uncaring partner. That's the thought that I'm having. It may be hard to articulate, but try articulating a thought like that. And once you have that thought, verbalize that sentence or repeat it mentally. Then replay that thought But instead of saying, I'm an uncaring partner, you start with, I'm having the thought that I'm an uncaring partner. And then you say it again to take another step back. I'm noticed that I'm having the thought that I'm an uncaring partner. Give yourself a chance to reflect on that mental shift and think about how that changes things, right? From I'm an uncaring partner to I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I'm an uncaring partner. Because that is just a thought. I know it seems different at first, but when we practice, it does feel like it has less power. Or you could say it in a silly voice. I wasn't really just ready to say something in a silly voice tonight, but maybe I'm going to be like, I'm a uncaring partner, right? Like, then I'm going to be like, well, that's definitely not. It feels way less than what it was before. It's way less scary now. Now it's like a little bit more silly. Um, so that's something else that you could do, or you could sing it. There's some other resources that I put in that handout that have different ways to engage in this kind of exercise. The other exercise that I will have a link to is these on the screen. And it's a meditation. It's very similar where we're giving the thought less power by allowing our thoughts to be on a leaf, and we'll watch it flow by on the stream. And I wanted to also teach breathing. I know that we all breathe and we all know how to breathe. And I know that when you look up anxiety stuff, breathing pops up. But I think that some things that I've learned in my training is that breathing this way is a lot more different than I thought. Um, so what I want folks to do, if you're comfortable with, if you're not, that's totally okay. But something that I teach and I've learned is that when you put your hand on your lower belly, and I know you can't see, but put your hand on your low belly. And then if you put your hand on your chest, what we often do when we're anxious and we kind of are getting more activated, right, is we breathe from our chest. And that makes it so much worse. So when you're trying breathing and it's not working and you're breathing from your chest, that's why. What you have to learn how to do is breathe from your bottom belly. So when I breathe in, my belly is moving, my chest is not. And I breathe out. So, and that might take time for some folks. I've had folks where it doesn't come right away, and that's okay. It's part of that building that muscle. But the other piece I want to say for breathing, if you cannot remember 478, there are important parts. So all you need to remember is double your exhale for as long as you inhaled. And when you breathe out like you're breathing through a straw. So you're going to very focused breathing. And by the time that 8 seconds comes, you're going to have barely anything left. But what I do want to do together is I'm going to do a breath. Also, do not continue doing these if you get lightheaded. Go ahead and stop. But I'm going to do the breath together. So let's breathe in for 4. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8. So what this does is when I said we were in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode, this brings us to our parasympathetic mode, where we're going to be calmer, we're able to, so when we're elevated like that in that fight, flight, freeze, we're not able to think. We're not able to uh, engage in those higher cognitive things. So when we're able to bring ourselves down, we can do that. This is especially helpful if you're having an anxiety attack. The important part for this is not to just do it when you are anxious. Do it outside of anxiety. Just make it a part of your daily practice. Set that intention for yourself. Because if we are doing it only when we're anxious, we might associate it only like, oh, I must be so anxious, I have to breathe. So I hope you can take away this neat thing. And then the thing is that it's nice because you could do it at any time. You don't need anything specific. It's something you can do right away and ground. And if you want to do 2 breaths, that's great. Like I said before, just be a little careful if you ever get lightheaded. So here I have links, which I have in the handouts, but I want to just speak on these, even though we're not going to go over it right away. One massive tool in the psych community is progressive muscle relaxation. And if you haven't heard of this before, what it essentially is like I said, with anxiety, we're tense, even without knowing it, things like that. The purpose of this exercise is to purposely tense your muscles, and you'll go from your head to your toe, and you'll tense each muscle and then release. And then you're going to feel physical relaxation in your body. Until you do it, it actually works very well for anxiety. But the nice part is you're also getting more in touch with your body. I think that we tend to forget about aspects of our body. Like we might not even know we got that shoulder tension until we sit and really look into ourselves. So this is a really helpful exercise that you can add to your daily practice. I also have bedtime yoga. I don't know if many have heard about that, but what's common in anxiety is that difficulty falling asleep, probably because you're worried about a whole bunch of different things, right? So what I like about bedtime yoga is that you have that breathing, you have that movement, and it's not intense movement, it's very gentle on the body. And it helps you get into a space where you are more grounded. Therefore, sleep is easier, right? You're not going to be as focused on the worries when you have this part of your sleep hygiene routine. Some other breathing exercise I know. So something before I go into that, these different tools may not fit you, but you can find one that fits you. So that's why I'm offering these different things to try out. And when you are trying something, give it a good 2 weeks before you decide it doesn't work for you. It takes 2 weeks to build a habit. So just want to point that out there. But I wanted to offer variety in breathing. So I added color breathing. And in color breathing, you think of a color that you find calming. And when you breathe in, you visualize that color entering your body and filling you with feelings of calm. And then you exhale a color that represents your anxiety, and you allow that to leave your body. So, me, myself, meditations are a bit harder for me to concentrate on. These kind of things where I'm doing a little bit of extra makes it easier for me to focus. So that's something I wanted to point out, but there's plenty of different breathing, different ways of being more mindful in your life and learning how to relax. Another link I put here is safe space, or safe place. And this is a meditation that's based on being able to find in your mind a place that you imagine as being very safe, and then grounding yourself. So anytime you're extremely overwhelmed, you will have this really easy skill to go to feel more safe and reassure yourself and also ground yourself in that space. Um, I also will have a video link of that meditation in that handout that I discussed. Before we get to questions, I do think finding help is difficult. As a provider, when anytime I look these things up, I'm like, it is so hard to find someone. So I wanted to make it a little bit easier for y'all. This will be in the handout, but just different ways of finding mental health providers so that you are able to tell your experiences to someone else and be able to work on this individually. And I'm not saying this as a mental health provider, but I think therapy is really helpful for at least that accountability piece, having someone to check in with and being able to talk about who's not involved in, I'm not involved in your life. Mental health providers aren't involved in your life. So there's that extra piece of like security, and we're also non-judgmental. And one piece I will say with finding a therapist, if you haven't done so before, the most important part and what makes change in therapy is your relationship with your provider. If you feel like you do not connect with that provider, of course, not just, relationships take time, but if you're not feeling like you connect with someone, please change your provider. Therapy does not work if you can't trust your therapist. So just a word of wisdom. And then I also have some crisis lines available here. The Illinois Warm Line is a wonderful service because you don't have to be in a crisis. They're just there to support you. And then we have the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. They have a Spanish option. And then also, if you're hard of hearing, have a hearing loss, if you're deaf, they have a video phone. And they also have a chat line. And then there's a crisis text line. So and also for anxiety, another treatment that coincides really well with therapy is like medication. And of course, that is up to you as an individual, whether or not you want to seek medication. However, that could be a recommendation, depending on the severity of your anxiety. All right. So, I am ready for questions.
And Dr. Mahoney, we did have one question in regard to the 478 breathing technique that you shared, which was great. I was breathing along with you. I believe someone asked how many times to go through those uh, rounds of breathing.
Mm-hmm. I would say generally start with two, or start with one, see how you feel. If you're feeling lightheaded, please stop and then you could restart. But I would say like about two times. It's really up to you. It depends on how elevated you are. So if you feel good after one breath, great. If you feel like you need another, also great. But I would not recommend like 10 minutes of breathing deeply back to back. So it's really up to you and your body and how you're feeling. There's no time, a specific number of times. But I appreciate that question. It is something I thought about as well when I was first learning about it.
And in addition to, I want to make sure that everyone saw the link or the document. It's in the chat, and you can download it from your chat. The resource list that Dr. Mahoney that she went through, you can just download that and have that on your computer. I also dropped a few more resources. Inner Peace Psychology, where psychological care, where Dr. Mahoney is a therapist. You can read more about her, read about the services that are offered there. They're located in Schaumburg, Illinois. If you're joining us from Illinois. Also, Mental Health America's website, MHAI's website, mhai.org, you can find Illinois-based resources as well as screening tools. I think the number is about up to 13. We are partnered with our national organization, Mental Health America, who have developed free online mental health tests for conditions such as anxiety, depression, postnatal depression. There are children's tests, parents tests for their children. We have a few tests that are available in Spanish as well. And what happens is you take that test. I always tell people it is not a diagnosis, but it is a conversation starter. So you take one of those tests and you look at the results, and maybe you have a conversation with your doctor or a mental health professional about those results. And it also, based on your zip code, the website will then direct you to other resources in your community. So I wanted to make sure everyone saw that. That is in the chat. We had a few more questions that came in. Patricia asked, how can we deal with anxiety as a family? That's a great question, Patricia.
Mhm. So depending on what is happening, right? What kind of anxiety you're dealing with, I think my go-to recommendation would be having a professional mediate that. So there is family therapy available depending on your insurance. And if you do have insurance, you can look at the back of your insurance card and call and ask about family therapy. Because I do think, like I said earlier, anxiety can be really frustrating for the person and then really frustrating for everyone else, right? So I think that when we are a family, being able to learn how to mediate these things, have more understanding, but also using the tools yourself, right? Like, so I don't know if you're speaking of like an adult family or like your parents and you have children, but I think like going back to that modeling these techniques, right? If we're really anxious, doing the breathing together, but also encouraging the person to do the breathing outside of when they're anxious and asking, what do you need? Understand. And if we don't know what we need, let's figure it out. And we could figure it out not when we're up here, right? If we're up to 10, we're not figuring much out. We come down and either we could take a break and come back and talk about what's happened, or outside of these really anxious times, we could talk about like, what would you need in these kind of moments? And it could change, but being able to communicate and also accept what other people need, right? If someone needs space and things like that. But there's a whole bunch of skills that you can learn in family therapy. And then I see the other question is, what other languages do you have? Um, what are you referring to, Patricia?
And if it's
Oh,
easier to turn on your mic, oh, okay. Um, so for the Mental Health America screens, most of the tests are in English. I closed the screen. I believe the anxiety and depression tests are also offered in Spanish. We're working on, well, National is working on other languages, but it's just English and Spanish for now.
and another thing to note is in different communities, anxiety can look differently. Um, so I am half I like to say I'm half Mexican. My mom's from Mexico. However, like I know in my Mexican side of my family, there's way more internalized, like physical. Like physically, I might feel my stomach hurts more and things like that. So that's how it might present in that population. So recognizing that anxiety looks different for all types of folks.
And what I'm doing, this screen is not allowing me to minimize while we're recording, but I'm going to drop a link to the MHAI podcasts. I had two conversations with two people or three people from Spanish speaking communities about how mental health looks different culturally. One of those conversations is in Spanish, and I didn't do that one, but the other one is in English. So that might be a good resource to listen to or to share with others as they go on their mental health journeys.
And then someone asked if they can get a copy of chat. Is that possible?
Yes, it is. And Susan, I can send that to you, or actually, I can just download it and send it to everyone who's attended this evening. That might be helpful for everyone.
Any other questions for folks? And you can unmute if you'd like. if typing is a little harder.
Dr. Mahoney, I'm going to drop my contact information in the chat. If anyone has
Mhm.
questions about Mental Health America of Illinois or any of our resources, are you okay dropping your email? I don't want to put you on the
Mhm.
spot. I should have asked you before.
Yeah, no, you're good. So I'm going to put my email. If anyone has questions, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. Direct you in whatever way is possible. And if we're going to get a copy of this chat, you'll have it. I actually forgot to put in that handout, so I apologize, but here is my email. Okay.
One other thing I'll say as we approach the end of this presentation, we have these presentations all the time. So the best way to learn about how you can join us again, um, join our newsletter. And you can, if you'd like to receive our newsletter, I usually drop the link, but you can just simply drop in the chat you'd like to be on the newsletter list, and I'll get you added. Next month we have a presentation about parenting. Um, I can't think of the title of the program now, but it's a parenting program geared for raising children between the ages of 2 and 12. And so if you'd like to be a part of that, just say you'd like to be a part of it, and I will make sure that you are on our list serve. We'll also have Dr. Mahoney back talking about anxiety,
Mhm.
talking about other topics in the new year.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, and if there's any topics anyone wants to know, please email. And I'm happy to talk about a whole bunch of things. Just happy to help. Um, yeah.
and and I will add too. Okay, ladies, I think they're all ladies. I see that you'd like to be on the newsletter. I'll make sure that you get them. I think I also dropped in. There may be people from outside of Illinois joining us, and what I wanted to make sure that you all had, you can. I don't have the link with me right now, but if you are joining us from outside of Illinois and would like to get connected with an affiliate that's closer to you, I would encourage you to go to mhanational.org. That's the national organization, and you can find an affiliate there in the search button, or just Google Mental Health America and then your state or your city. Some larger cities have their own chapters, but I will drop that in the chat as well.
Well, she's doing that. I do want to thank you for coming today and showing up for yourself, or if it was for someone else. Um, Mental health isn't easy, and I hope that you're able to take away something that you can do in your day-to-day life and kind of learn how to relax, because I feel like society definitely doesn't encourage that nowadays, right? We got to be on 24/7. So I hope this was valuable for all of you. And again, I am happy to be a contact in any way. Um, so thank you. Okay.
Thank you all for joining us. And thank you so much, Dr. Mahoney. Such valuable information. And I think you can see too from the chat that everyone, your presentation was well received. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.